While we're waiting for people to join, I'm going to experiment with share screen. Yeah, no, it's not going to work.
Is there something you'd like me to try, Robert?
There is a section we're going to get to where there's this link to the Miro board, and I was wondering if we could get the Miro board on the screen easily. I could probably fight through it with my own setup, but it would require changing system level permissions for browsers. In the future, I might approach such things by just making a snapshot and creating a slide for the minutes, but all right, we're still waiting for people to join. Give it a couple of more minutes. I'll remind everyone that we'd like people to share audio and video, but do remember that the session is being recorded and will appear on YouTube later. I'd ask that several of you keep an eye on the chat. I have enough windows open that I don't always see when something appears in the chat that might need attention. Feel free to interrupt if there's something that occurs there that needs to be brought to the call at the time or during the any other business part of the call. All right, the rate of joining has slowed. We'll go ahead and start. Welcome, everyone. Thanks again for taking time out of your day to participate in these calls. As I mentioned a little earlier, we encourage everyone to share audio and video, and we don't run a queue. This is an open forum. If you have something that you want to discuss, just please jump in. The session is being recorded. It will appear on YouTube later. Keep that in mind as you are commenting. The agenda is what's captured in the notes at notes.ietf.org for the page. If anyone doesn't have a link to that page, looks like there's been a link dropped into the chat already. Does anyone have any agenda bashes before we start in? All right. Moving first into hot topics. The big hot topic for lots of us from last week are the Mailman 3 transition and the mail delivery issues that occurred in its wake. I have quite a bit of text. I'm going to leave it for people to read. The high order bits in this text are that the Mailman 3 transition itself went actually very smoothly for the mailman part. There were a few issues, particularly related to the glue between postfix and postconfirm that interacted with things in Mailman that exhibited in loops for messages sent to list owners. Those are still being cleaned out. We believe they were all cleaned out, but there was some indication from Sirius earlier today that there are some situations where some of these loops can still occur and that there will be the associated consequence of some unnecessary things ending up in the moderation queue. But from Mailman's perspective, migration worked very well. That said, there was a number of issues in the interface between postconfirm and Mailman that exhibited several ways, the most noticeable and problematic of which were that mail sent to the lists was accepted. It appeared from the sender's perspective that everything was fine, but the messages were not sent to the list. Through a quirk in Mailman, those messages have been saved. They might be recoverable. Some of the more obvious ones to find have been recovered. I'll get in a moment to one detail that I'll bring up about the difficulties in that recovery. But the high order bit again, just pulling back up to the high order level, we believe that since about 1900 on Thursday, UTC, that any mail sent to the lists is actually being sent to the lists and making it to the archive the way it is supposed to. If anybody has any evidence that that's not the case, please bring it up very, very early. But so far from what we've been watching, it looks like delivery is doing what it is supposed to do. I was able to identify and resubmit the messages from the data tracker, in particular the announce tool at the data tracker, from the RFC editor's announce tool, just because they have some very special characteristics that made them easy to find and become confident that they were legitimate and should move through to the list. Their remaining messages are difficult. If you look in the more detailed section at the third paragraph in particular, there are some small number of hundreds, like 300 to 400 of these messages we think that are lying out there in a directory that's got 47,000 things in it. And of those 47,000 things, most of them should not be delivered anywhere, certainly not to lists. And it is a big coding effort to, at this point, to go through and figure out which one of those things are legitimate and should be sent through. So our recommendation at this time is that if you had something important and it didn't make it to the list, resend it. We're going to continue to work on backfilling and sending the messages that are captured in postconfirm's cache, but it is going to take time. And in the interest of making sure that the IETF work continues in a timely manner, people should just resend. So if you read further into the details, I'll call attention in particular in Sirius's report to the second to the last paragraph. As we went into this period after the migration, initially mail was delivering. Tests through Mailman 3 looked fine. Mail was flowing into the archive at an appropriate rate. Some problems with details were found and adjustments were made to how things were delivering that had side effects. And as more changes were made dealing with those side effects, we ended up with further degraded service at one point it was improved back to the point where the number of messages not making it were minuscule. And then on Thursday, we hit this 3 hour period where no messages to the lists were going through at all. The breakthrough moment at the end of that 3 hours, we believe, addressed all of the delivery issues. And as I said before, mail is going through as we expect at this point. You can see in that paragraph the nitty gritty detail was that there's a new interface between Post Confirm and Mailman 3 that did not exist. It behaved very differently in the interface between Post Confirm and Mailman 2, where Post Confirm and Post Fix in this case were having disagreements about what was allowed as line endings inside of a message. For those not having to deal with Post Confirm before, it is a fairly complex piece of code. And one of the unfortunate things that it did when messages were failing to be delivered through these points is if anything complained, it was swallowing the complaint. So nothing was coming out into logs. It took a bit to figure out where things were actually dying. We do have on the list of future improvements the rewrite of Post Confirm, separating its challenging part from its rewriting parts as we move this functionality into the new mail processing system. And it will be a goal there to increase observability into the system so that should we ever encounter an issue like this again, there are many more tools at hand to diagnose what's happening in a more timely manner. All right, with my describing those things, hopefully there's been enough time for anyone who had not read this section of text before we got to the call to skim through it now. I'll stop and ask if anyone has any questions about this so far. Mark, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
I think you handled it extremely well. You made all the points that I was intending to make, so I'm not sure there's anything I can add apart from possibly the question in some minds would be, did we not test before the migration? Actually, the first thing I want to say is that everything, as Robert has said, completely. That's exactly how it played out and played out with us. We were working round the clock on this. We were working together. It was a lot of challenges for us. I think the only thing I can add would be to the question of, did we not test the migration before going ahead? Yes, we did many times, but we didn't anticipate the challenges that we found in the end, as can happen with these things. And I would say this isn't the final system that we're delivering. It's a halfway point, if you like, and an in-place migration. And the truth is, could we have devised more tests to anticipate some of the areas with post-confirm and the line endings issue that we came across, which was really naughty? And big thanks to John Levine and several other people in the IETF who helped us figure out and get to that aha moment. We could have, but we were already, all of us, IETF, the Sirius team, all of us feeling the pressure to get this into production. And we took the view, we could be criticised for that, of course, and huge apologies to everyone who did get hit by this problem. But we took the view that it would have added so much more time to getting us into production with this interim system that it was the right risk reward decision for it. That's it, really. And again, I'm here with Robert to answer any detailed questions you have on this.
All right. I'm not hearing anybody jump in with any questions. I'll ask one in a minute of the.
So if you don't mind, Robert and Mark, I made on my own a mailman 2 to mailman 3 on a much smaller email server, of course. But as a personal person, I was quite disappointed by the failure on this. Again, not speaking an ISG member, right? As an individual contributor. And that's it, right? As long as it's fixed, it's fixed.
Yep. Warren, just jump in. We don't need to run a queue.
Okay. I mean, sort of responding to that, I think we've been trying to move from Mailman 2 to Mailman 3 for a very, very, very long time. And at some point, I think we had to basically just sort of jump in. Could it have gone absolutely perfect? Maybe. But, you know, I think that this went much better than I was expecting, taking into consideration like how much weird hackery and stuff we'd done to Mailman 2. So, you know, didn't go perfect, but I think it went better than I was expecting, and certainly better than has happened in the past when I tried to do any Mailman migration stuff. So, woo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Very much appreciated. And Eric, I do understand your point, the disappointment. You're right to be. We were disappointed with ourselves. We wanted to get it absolutely perfect. I would say it was probably the most challenging migration we have ever done. Very big, a lot of moving parts and lots of challenges with that. I don't mean that to be an excuse. I mean it to be an observation. But understand your disappointment, and Warren, very much appreciate your comments on it as well. There could have been many more things that went wrong, and we're going to take what we got on that. And apologies to anyone for any challenges it did cause, but yeah, there could have been a lot more go wrong, to be honest.
Thank you, Mark.
So the next
Both.
observation that I have about this incident overall is that we had taken the approach at the beginning that the people that needed to be kept in the loop most intensely were the people that were going to have to moderate or make administrative changes to lists. And while we had made some announcements on IETF, announced to everyone that things were coming, when we got closer to actually pulling the trigger on this, because as you remember, we scheduled the transition and then deferred it several times as we were finding problems moving along. We hadn't told the broader community that, yes, today was the day, that Monday a week ago. And then as we ran into trouble with the mail delivery and it became apparent that messages weren't coming to the lists, we kind of ended up in a frog boiled like situation where, you know, we were continually thinking, oh, this will be fixed in just a moment, and it wasn't. And we continued to focus our messaging on the owners and moderators, and missed the opportunity to reach out to the larger community to let them know that there were more, that there were problems, that they should understand that messages that they had sent may not have been delivered. And I will take responsibility for that myself. Both Jay and Greg realized along the way that there were opportunities that we could take. Greg jumped in, put up an explanatory blog post. Jay noticed that we hadn't been sending things to IETF Announce and addressed that. I noticed this weekend that we had not sent anything to IETF at IETF.org, and some questions had started to appear there. I think it just at a very high order bit that the next round of things that we do that have a potential for disruption, and particularly if we get into a disrupted period, we need to be more aggressive about over communicating, and we will do so. So. All right, unless somebody has more questions about the mailman transition, I'm going to move forward.
So, Robert, I have one nit, and I'm not sure if it's the same thing that Bob Hinden raised, but when something is moderated, put into the held message queue, you can't jump from anything in the message straight to that queue to deal with it. We used to have a link in that to go here to deal with it. Now you have to go to the page that has the mailman3.ietf.org and then go find your list. Anyway, it's just a lot bigger pain than it used to be.
It is. We've heard this from dozens of people at this
Okay.
point. Consequence of some decisions that the Mailman 3 maintainers made as they were separating the functionality into different places. The link to what to do was something that would be completely unknown to the system that was sending the link.
I see.
We have put in a feature request for our instance for them to put these links back, and it's in the queue to be worked on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That I didn't see that in the write-up that you asked for that.
No.
Okay. Fair enough.
It will be going into Mailman.
Good. Because I can't imagine we're the only ones frustrated by it.
Oh, I'm sure that's correct too. We've had core team on this project. It will be going back into Mailman.
Thank you.
All right. A quick report on our tools team retreat. Week before last, the core developers got together with Roman, Greg and Jay. Gene was there to go through our strategy for the upcoming year. We made several big decisions. The largest of which was that we reassessed whether or not our move towards Amazon was the correct one and decided that it wasn't. We were losing too much time to the complexity that was required to do things in Amazon. The AWS is designed for solving problems at a scale for people that are running global retail establishments. The problems that we need to solve are much simpler and are easier to address in different fabrics. So we've already started adjusting and have seen some very promising and rapid results moving our initial instances of the data tracker, for example, into DigitalOcean and to Azure. We are to the point where I will talk a little bit later in the infrastructure planning about when we're going to move those things. Jumping back to the tools retreat, we did update the tools roadmap. There is a link in the agenda there. The cards, several people have noted on the roadmap, could have more detail added to them. I had intended to be adding detail last week. My time last week went into supporting the Mailman 3 transition instead. I hope shortly to be adding more detail to the cards on the roadmap. So when you're looking at, for example, what does the card that says unified access to artifacts actually mean, it will be a little more self-documenting. So one of the larger decisions that went into building that roadmap was we needed to take the step to separate our identity provider from the data tracker so that we could take advantage of work that other parties have done. The OIDC provider package that's written in Django that we were using is not particularly feature rich. One feature in particular that it doesn't support that we've gotten lots of requests for, two-factor authentication for the data tracker. So we are soon going to be taking the step of separating the provider out to one based on a source package called Keycloak. The Keycloak will allow some different modes of authentication. The authorization that happens based on that authentication will look the same. So, and the last thing that I wanted to call out from the retreat, there were a lot more details, but for the purposes of this call, the one thing I wanted to call out was we noticed that there has been drift over the last year in particular about how we use the phrase tools team. Sometimes it is the people who are on this call. Sometimes it is the staff that is hired by the LLC to work on the tooling. I don't think that there is a significant amount of community confusion, but the disconnect is becoming more jarring, and we're looking for a way to resolve that and speak more clearly about what we mean in each case. Any ideas around that are very welcome.
I would prefer to the team be the one that includes the community, because that's a term we use elsewhere.
All right.
I'm not so sure that I've shared your view, Russ, there. I mean, I don't mind either way, right? As long as we got two different words.
Well, like GenArt is an example. GenArt, ArtArt, there's a bunch of places where team is part of a community thing.
Yeah. Then that's fine.
All right, I'll move forward and start talking about what we're planning to do in the short term for infrastructure transition. We are overdue on making our transition. We're moving at best speeds. We're in the final weeks. We are to the point where it's time to schedule cutting over the big applications, the data tracker, mail archive, the main www site, and the IMAP services. Those are all going to have to go in close coordination. We're going to be trying to work out the date that we would do that on over the next few days. We have some details that we need to nail down first to make sure that we are ready. Some of them involve mail transport. How is mail going to get to the data tracker when the data tracker is not on the same host with the mail server? We've got a plan, but that plan needs to be turned into proven code before we schedule a cutover date. We're working those details out. We're working out the last of the other external interfaces that we have. In particular, we have some places where we interact with an API at IANA. We're in contact with the staff at IANA to make sure that that's going to go smoothly. Once we have these details nailed down, we'll be communicating widely to the community an outage to move these things. That outage will be a significant one. I would expect that it would be measured in hours, not in minutes, but it shouldn't be more than 3 or 4 hours at my initial thinking. We'll be running some final migration tests before we get there to fine tune that estimate. If we're really lucky, it'll turn into seconds instead of hours, but I'm not going to count on it at this time. The other big transition that we have is moving our core mail processing pipeline from where it currently is on IETFA into a cloud service. And this is the next big task for Sirius. When the dust settles on the Mailman 3, they'll be focusing on that uplift. So we'll have more details about that, and we will telegraph the timing for that transition quite widely once it's known. We've been ready for some time to move RFCPA. This is the production center, the server for the RFC production center, and the origin server for rfceditor.ietf.org into the cloud. We deferred it for the time that we were out for the retreat and the Mailman 3 transition. Our current plan is to move that into the cloud tomorrow morning. There are some details about the progress we've made since the last meeting, the services that we've moved. There was a lot of work that has gone into things that look simple that turn out to be really difficult. There were some websites that were just flat files that we are moving to be served out of buckets at Cloudflare, or a combination of Cloudflare and some other services. There are sections of what had been served under www.ietf.org/insert deep directory path here to effectively static files, where these static files are also being moved up to be served from a bucket server. There were a huge Apache configuration files for some sites that were doing nothing but redirects with twisty passages and redirect logic that we worked our way through and simplified down to the point where we have these redirects configured as either bulk redirects or redirect rules at Cloudflare. They are still complex. There are still places where we have redirects to redirects that we haven't worked out, but we do have them where they are not, where the requests to get the redirect don't have to go all the way to an origin server. They're being handled at the edge. So, and we've put a lot of effort in this last month into building out our monitoring and alerting infrastructure. And it's looking very exciting at this point. We're going to have a lot more visibility into things than we have had in the past. There is a link at the end of this section to a diagram about our current and future infrastructure state. I encourage people to look around, see if they find this diagram informative. We will refine this diagram as we move along. The attempt that we've made is to show where services had been running and where they are running now. If we had drawn this before the retreat, most of the services running in AWS would have been under new infrastructure. But to echo the what I mentioned before, we've decided that this isn't working out well for us. As soon as we have moved the rest of the things off of IETF and the few other things that are still on AMS's infrastructure, we will end up moving the services that are listed there as running in the main EKS Kubernetes cluster into DigitalOcean or Azure. And we will see at that point how much of the email processing system, which we are still currently planning on deploying in Amazon, but are discussing with Sirius whether or not that's still the right thing to do, will remain going into Amazon. Does anybody have any questions about where we're going with infrastructure transitions at this point?
Yeah, this is John. I think I would like to have a little chat about where the mail is going. I think leaving it at AWS is the right thing to do, but I would like to understand better what's going to be where.
I'm guessing at the what's going to be where question. The intent is that the entire mail processing system would be a unit. There would be
Oops, where'd he go?
I'm sure he'll be back.
John, you scared him off.
Sorry.
Perfectly reasonable question. We're actually big fans of DigitalOcean as well, so we are evaluating that. And there
Nice.
is one component of the mail system on SES, which will certainly remain on Amazon, but we are, I don't want to steal any of Robert's thunder, but we are seriously looking at the DigitalOcean picture as well. We think it's a pretty good decision, actually. So we're evaluating whether other components of the mail system can go there. But we do need SES to remain for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I mean, my DigitalOcean is a fine place to host your servers, but they have a dreadful reputation for sending mail. If you try to send mail from there, the chances of it being delivered are not great.
So John, I just would say maybe we could just wait till Robert gets back so he can hear this as well.
No, that's
I'm sure he's trying to rejoin. Yeah. So I think if we have 30 seconds, we can let him get back in.
What's more surprising is that it looks like Jean is mostly sharing the same connection, and she's okay, right?
Have I made it back?
Okay.
Looks that way.
Yeah, no idea what happened there. From my perspective, it looked like I was still connected. I could hear what was happening, but oh well.
Did you hear John's questions then, Robert?
No.
Okay. Maybe John.
Yeah, the gist of it is that I would not try to send mail from DigitalOcean. They have a terrible reputation, and Azure is. And depending which problem is, Microsoft has like 4 different mail systems that don't talk to each other, and some of them are okay, and some of them are dreadful. Whereas SES is reliably pretty good. So yeah.
Great.
So SES is the sending service. It's the last edge out. So that can be a different. There can be a different decision made about using that and where we would run our receivers, our submission points, and the things that are processing Mailman and serving the Mailman 3 origins.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense to use SES for outbound and put the other stuff other places.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Were there any other questions that came up that I missed when I was disconnected? If anybody has any suggestions about how we can better represent, if you've had an opportunity to look at that diagram and have questions about it later or suggestions about what would make it a better communications tool, just please send them to us. I think that gets us to the point in the call where everything else is FYI. One FYI that I want to actually cover in real time, the LLC has hired an additional developer. Matthew Holloway will be starting with us in a little over a week, early part of next week. He's a front-end specialist. We've worked with him before in some of the other organizations that he's contracted with doing work for us. We believe that that's going to be the last addition to our direct programming staff for quite some time. But that puts us in a place where there is a lot of work where we've been reaching out for front-end help that we'll be taking in-house. So,
not to jump on in if there are any questions about that, but I did want to take a moment to talk about the handling disruptive participants item.
Sure, please go ahead.
Yeah, just building on the idea of over communicating that theme. This is going to this change that'll happen to Mitaco. Actually, I don't think it says Mitaco in the notes, but just to note that it's a Mitaco feature that's going to be implemented. So this will be put in place before 120 IETF 120 meeting. And we're already thinking and working a lot on making sure that the session chairs will have a chance to test this out and be comfortable with it and updating documentation so that there are no surprises and people know how to use this feature if it's necessary.
All right. Anybody have any questions about the remaining parts of the notes? Any of the things where we've talked about changes to the applications that we haven't covered in voice already? Does anyone have any other business? All right, hearing none, I think we're done. Thank you again. A quick reminder, there is a calendar you can subscribe to for the tools calls. The next one is on that calendar. I'll be putting the ones after that on the calendar shortly. So, and we will see you on the tools discuss list online and hope to see many of you when we get to Vancouver. Talk to you soon.